This is the Rising Tide Startups podcast, where we chat with startup founders from all over the globe to help you escape the cubicle and begin your own startup journey. Make sure you take notes. Every episode of Rising Tide Startups is sponsored by Podbrand Media. Let Podbrand create and host your company branded podcast. Learn more at podbrandmedia.com. This is Kevin Pruitt with Rising Tide Startups. I have a very special guest with me today, Hailey Brooke Weiss. Hailey, thanks for joining us on Rising Tide.
Thanks so much for having me.
It is, every guest that we have on the podcast, I get a chance to have a pre-chat before we hit the big red record button here, and it has been actually a delightful 3 minutes that we had a chance to talk and get some technical stuff worked out. But Hailey, if you and I met at a networking event, how would you introduce yourself to me?
I would tell you I'm Hailey Brooke Weiss. I'm the founder of Power Move Marketing, a full-service digital marketing agency.
And family?
Yeah, so I'm married. I have a husband and a dog. I live in North Carolina, and now work remote all around the world.
So I always stalk my guests, online. So I know that, some of the posts that you've made, you talk about, that your husband is involved in professional baseball, and I believe in the Korean Baseball League, or at least heading that direction. So that's quite a leap from, North Carolina to Seoul, Korea, or Busan, or wherever you're going to land.
Yeah.
But tell us about, number one, about how you even prepare mentally, as a business owner.
Yeah, it's crazy. So we found out last year that he was going to be playing in Korea, and we had 48 hours to get out there. So I knew I wanted to be with him out there. I'm a big traveler myself. I knew it was something that could have happened. So really, the biggest thing was, thankfully we got to leave on a weekend. So I had a couple of days to prep, and first thing was first figuring out the time zone and how to kind of manage my calls and things like that. Because really, that's what I need to be online for.
Yeah. Is your current company or your current agency, is it fully remote, or you meet in a central location, or you have kind of a mix?
Yeah, so we're fully remote. We meet, typically the majority of the team meets once a year for a retreat we do. And occasionally we might meet on site for a conference or a client, something or another. But for the most part, it's remote, no requirements to do anything in person.
So I kind of jumped ahead in the story here, jumped right to what you're going to be doing now. But let's back up and kind of lay a really solid foundation for the rest of our chat here, and the idea of, hey, let's go back to university times. What were you doing in the university? How did that prepare you for what you're doing now?
Absolutely. So born and raised in North Carolina, got a scholarship to play volleyball at Wake Forest University. So go Deacons always. Yes. I was a captain and libero for their Division I varsity volleyball team, played all 4 years there. Ran out of eligibility. So for my master's, I was a regular student, and I had already begun having some small clients for social media management, some fractional CMO work, and just very quickly realized that these founders need an option that's like one-stop shop, plug in. You can get your photo shoots done, your social media, your paid ads, basically like an in-house marketing experience, but through an agency, because the time and resources it takes to build a full team, a lot of these companies, although they're really successful, just don't have the time or resources to do that.
And I imagine some of the work is cyclical anyway. So, you wouldn't want to be having people full-time staff that might not be as busy all year long type thing. So.
Yeah, especially depending on the business. If your business is seasonal, a lot of your stuff is going to be seasonal. So it's nice to have an agency that can kind of plug and play. Exactly.
So did you study business? You study marketing in college?
So my undergrad was communications with a minor in film and media aesthetics. And so I knew kind of right off the bat, it's a great major, great stuff to have. Comm is the most diverse major there is in terms of going and finding jobs after. But I felt like I was still missing a little bit of the business acumen portion of it. So I was actually committed to play sand volleyball at Texas A&M Corpus Christi, but the only master's program there that really worked with the sand volleyball schedule at the time would have been a master's in communication, which I already had my undergrad. So kind of in the final hour, I found out I was accepted into Wake Forest program, which was the third best business management program in the country. I didn't think I was going to get in, so I had already, made all my plans and yada yada, and then got into there. And so obviously, it's basically like an accelerated MBA program. So you do 1 year is basically all of the business portion of it, and then if you do an additional year, you can finish out your full MBA with the additional accounting and finance courses. So I only had to take 2 finance courses and 2 accounting courses in that initial year, thankfully, but the majority was business, marketing, HR, business law, all of that. It was awesome.
My major was economics, and I think I survived accounting. So it was like it was just and
I know
finance
I knew a lot in undergrad, so it was definitely different. It was a shock.
There's no doubt. I have a very good friend that's an MBA graduate from Wake Forest as well, a number of years before, I'm sure. But that is a great school. That is for certainly in that respect. But so talk about your transition post MBA. I mean, you started working for some clients. I mean, I'm sure you were more freelancing, and then it just kind of grew into something that was more than you could do on your own.
Yeah, by the time I graduated grad school, I had about 7 of my own clients, and immediately I knew I wanted to hire someone. I hired someone who was kind of in my network who did marketing. She's amazing, Connie. She's still with me today. So we've been going for a little over about 5 years now. And she's just beyond amazing. So that was the first thing, was getting somebody embedded and keeping her from the beginning, because she's been so instrumental in helping grow and develop the team. And just having that experience working at another agency and coming to us was really, again, really instrumental.
Yeah. I think some of the things that she would bring with her, maybe even questions you had as you were trying to, form your own agency, like how did they do it at this other agency? How did they do these particular things, and what services provided, and, back end office, support was needed in those things. But it's, I mean, entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart, is it?
No, that's what we talk about a lot as a business owner. You have to be the most accountable person. So it's like, even if you didn't even touch a project, you weren't even in the hemisphere of it. If something goes wrong, it's going to come back on you, and it's your job to fix it and make things right. But it's kind of the same with being a leader and being a captain, back on the volleyball team. It didn't matter if I wasn't even on the court when something happened or something off the court happened. Like, as a leader, it's your job to suck it up and fix it, whatever it is.
I want you to go back and kind of think about those early days, when you first got started, and were you working together in a location, or was it remote from the beginning? And about when did Power Move Marketing start?
Yeah. So remote from the jump. I was really lucky. Both my parents growing up, both always worked remote. My mom is a mortgage loan processor for a bank, and then my dad owned an environmental laboratory and sold it. So they had both always worked remote. That was really normal for me. So started with that. And then from there, really just honing in on what it is that we do in our core competencies.
That was so is that really the differentiator? I mean, there's a marketing agency on every corner. I mean, you have one of the most competitive spaces probably in the world right now, especially with the advent of kind of the digital age and post COVID. But what is your unique selling proposition?
Yeah, I would say really just goes back to why we were founded, right? Working with startups and seeing what they needed. They didn't need an agency that was just cookie cutter. They do the same thing for everybody. It's like they needed something really specific. So it was like the end of 2019, I really figured that out. And then going into 2020, technically April 17th is our big 5th birthday coming up. But just during that first little period, figuring out like, wow, these brands, they have an ads agency, and the ads agency isn't really doing that well, and they're blaming it on creative. And then creative, the creative agency they have is blaming the shortcomings on the branding, and the branding's blaming it on this. Like, it felt like instead of having a team working together, it felt like a lot of finger pointing, and it was like, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm just a fractional CMO and my head's about to explode. I can't imagine how the real CEO feels about this. So that was
Mm.
really my main goal, was like, let's make an agency that when you plug in with us, you're not married to a really long contract.
Hmm.
Again, some of these businesses don't even know if they're going to be a business in 18 months.
Yep.
Why are they
Yep.
signing up for 18-month long contracts?
Right.
Um, and we really want to make sure that we're malleable with them because,
Hmm.
it's like, okay, TikTok could get banned January 19th, right? I
Yep.
don't know when this will air, but we
Right.
might know by then.
Yep.
There's different things that happen, like the iOS 21 update that completely changed Facebook ads. You have the FCC coming out with influencer guidelines and different disclosures. Like, marketing is constantly changing. And I was like, there
Hmm.
needs to be a marketing partner that's really malleable to that, not
Yep.
just cookie cutter AI. Okay, here's your Canva templates. Like,
Right.
good luck.
Exactly.
It just has to be more in depth than that.
I it is, I mean, and the things that you mentioned there are so apropos because it's like, legislative changes, you have new competition, you have
Yeah.
technological changes that are happening. I mean, AI is just a monster in its own. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
and I don't mean that in a negative sense. It's just it's uncontrollable in its own, kind of life cycle that it's going through right now, and the just the advancements that are happening just
Yeah.
almost weekly. It's almost like the crypto space. I mean, it's just
I
like the
know.
Wild West. But
Exactly. And everyone's kind of afraid of AI, but my thing is like, then be irreplaceable, right? Like, there's
mm,
certain things, if you use AI a lot, people who don't really use it a lot, they think anything can be replaced with AI. So you can always kind of tell how much somebody uses it.
yep,
Because somebody who really does use it all the time really has a good understanding of its limits. And it does have a lot of limits. And my personal belief is like, AI should free you up as a human to be able to do more things that only humans can do.
yep. And that is such a, I mean, you need to make a T-shirt that says that, because I get such a powerful and true message. I mean,
Yeah.
yesterday I was working with a teammate, and they had crafted an email and just seemed so wordy, and literally just took the email and just said, okay, cut 50% of this out and say the same thing. And it was
Exactly.
amazing how quickly the output was. And I'm thinking, you know what, how long would that have taken, you know, me to do or them to do
Oh
if we
yeah.
really sat down, and would it have been as good? I mean, the grammar was correct, the syntax, everything was in order. The only thing we needed to do is just put human eyes on it again, just to
Polish
say,
it up
hey,
a
does
little
this
bit.
sound right? Yeah,
Yeah.
does this sound like my voice, as I
Yeah.
as we're speaking? But I'm curious, like we talked about, solopreneurship not being for the faint of heart. It can
Yeah.
also be one of the most lonely experiences,
Yeah.
that you would encounter. So what does your inner circle look like? Maybe even outside of Power Move Marketing, is there a trusted inner circle that says, you know what, this is where I go when I need when I need to vent. This is where I go when I need to really ask these hard questions.
Yeah. Thankfully, my dad's also a business owner, so we don't talk shop too awful often. But he's really one of those people that is a backstop for me and someone I lean on. Same. My mom is an awesome resource. And then outside of
Hmm.
that, obviously my husband and some close friends, especially some that I've worked with on projects and met them through doing marketing. So like, there's founders I've met who I just really respect. They're in a similar boat with me. And, we might be doing their marketing and that's our expertise, but they have amazing expertises in their
Yeah.
own right. So it's been cool to like service so many clients who have also become trusted mentors, friends,
Hmm.
people that I mentor, etc.
One thing that I have noticed, and we have been connected on LinkedIn for, I'm guessing maybe a couple of years, but
Yeah.
one thing that I've noticed in your content is how consistent you are, with there's not a fake element to it, but there is a very positive message that you're conveying in your content. And that's hard to maintain if it's not true. And so I
Yeah.
think that that's probably who you are, that's how you may attack business. That's how you may go through your day is, with this attitude that it's like, hey, we have an opportunity to grow here. This is not a problem.
Yeah.
This is really an opportunity to kind of stretch us a little bit. This is an opportunity to refine our processes, look back. Are we doing some things we don't need to be doing? That type of
Yeah.
thing. But that really does come through in virtually all of your content.
Oh,
So,
that's so kind.
kudos to you for that.
Thank you. I try to think of myself as an optimistic person. I've worked with a lot of business owners who are kind of on the more pessimistic side.
Yep.
And obviously, yes, Murphy's Law, anything that can go wrong will go wrong and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, like this is all a process.
Yep.
I mean, for me, I'm not looking for some big exit or, this is where I feel like I'm supposed to be. I'm really enjoying the process and, wherever it moves from there. And I think more people, if they celebrated the small wins and thought about how amazing whatever it is that they're doing really truly was, they would probably feel really optimistic as well. Because it's easy to get down on yourself. There's definitely days where I'm like, oh, dragging. And it's like, I don't really have time for that. I don't have time to complain or feel sorry for myself. I'm like, I have 30 team members on my team that like I control, the majority, if not all of their livelihood. And it's really, I take that with a lot of seriousness. So I'm like, well, while I'm sitting here feeling bad for myself and feeling sad, oh, a client's upset about something, like I have to be in immediate solution, problem solving mode. That's the complaining stuff is for my girlfriends at dinner. The problem solving stuff has to happen during the 9 to 5.
That certainly comes through. That certainly comes through. And this is a great time to take a break and just hear from our sponsors. But when we come back, we're going to drill down a little bit more into maybe what happens day to day in Power Move marketing. At Navicus, we know you spend far too much time on administrative tasks. Let us take those off your plate so you can focus on the highest value activities in your business. We have highly trained, highly vetted specialists ready to take on those administrative responsibilities at an affordable and effective rate. Check us out at navicus.com, proud sponsor of Rising Tide Startups podcast. We are back. Once again, I am talking with Hailey Brooke Weiss from Power Move Marketing. Hailey, thanks again for joining us. We've had a great 15-minute chat up to this point or so, but I really want to kind of drill down a little bit. Like, walk through a typical day, leading an agency.
Yeah.
Or is there such a thing?
I was about to say there's a lot of variability. Our, standard deviation can be quite wide. But I'd say, most days I get up, obviously I was an athlete in college. So normally, I get up, do my workouts, run, we have a sauna at the house. So I take wellness really seriously. I think if you're physically well, you can be mentally well.
Yep.
And then from there, really start my day off catching up on emails, Slack, LinkedIn messages, any outstanding stuff. I'm a big to-do list person. So I'm normally really good about judging my day, making a to-do list and executing it. Rarely do my things roll over. But if they do, I'll make sure that's handled in the morning, or I might get up a little extra early. From there, the majority of my day is either team coordination, things that need to be coordinated, or working on new client acquisition and then current client success, making sure everyone's happy. Thankfully, the agency has grown to a point where I personally don't need to be in every single little thing for every client. And not only do I not need to be in it, but there's people who are better at those things than me. And that's
great really to recognize that.
My goal. Yes. So sometimes when I talk to a client on the phone, they're like, oh, well, I get to work with you personally. I'm like, well, you can, but I'll tell you what, I would much rather have such and such doing my stuff than me. Like, they are the true experts of it. I just talk about it at this point. So I really like to boost our team up because they really are so amazing at what they do. So it's really my job to convey that to other people.
I think that is so smart. It's like Steve Jobs. If you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room, type thing. So that whole idea that, hiring people that are better than you are at whatever that task is. And, I do find myself in a team that I lead. I find myself that I spend a lot of time just trying to put them in a position to succeed.
Yeah.
make sure they're resourced, make sure I can be a sounding board, make sure I can answer questions that they have if they need to make a decision, that type of thing. But and then at the end of the day, just get out of the way, and
Yep.
just be there when needed and lead when you need to. Don't micromanage
I
and
was gonna
it's a
say,
hard balance.
maybe to a fault, I definitely don't micromanage. I'm a big believer. Let creative people be creative.
Yeah.
Let analytical people be analytical. Like, if you feel like you need to micromanage someone all the time, it's one of two things. Either you need to hire someone else, like they're just not a
Hmm.
good fit, or
Hmm.
you have to look intrinsically and say, okay, why am I struggling so much to delegate this task?
Hmm.
And when I delegate it, why do I feel the need to be looking over their
Yep.
shoulder? Because people don't do their best work when they're micromanaged
Right.
either. You think you're helping and you're just taking a load off them or making sure it's quality control. But that's reviewing it after, not
Hmm.
micromanaging their process. And I think that's the beauty of remote work. You really have to trust your employees. And at the end of the day, if it's not a good fit, then it's not a good fit at your company. Micromanaging them isn't going to improve their performance long term.
Yeah. And I think, it's funny because I think as at bosses, we're sometimes reluctant to make change and to make a change in personnel and, actually let somebody go. But in some ways, they may be recognizing that as well. They may feel like this isn't a good fit. I get it, type thing. It's
Yeah.
mutual benefit, but I also think that sometimes when I've micromanaged is because I did a poor job on the front end of explaining what we were looking for. So I'm
Yeah.
making up for that on the back end, so I can, kind of course correct a little bit.
Yeah.
But
And it's hard in the
um,
creative field too. It's like it's hard to, give every parameter for what you want because you want to see
exactly.
how creative people can be. So that's what gets me excited. Like, we don't normally have to tell our team, make sure you create a reel that's 30 seconds, that's this and
Hmm.
that. It's like, no, like, let's talk about the concepts and see how they bring it to life. And so many times, whether it's an email or a paid ad or an influencer campaign, it's like, wow, I'm so much more blown away when I let them do what they were thinking and then maybe come in with my own ideas to make it sharper.
Hmm.
But more times than not, I'm just really impressed by what they're able to put together.
Yeah, and it kind of reminds me of like, artists. I mean, the frame of the canvas is important because there's at least some boundary. But
Yeah.
a white canvas is important because it provides space to be creative. So, where do you find that balance, between what is the broad parameters versus, micro guidance that you don't want to provide. But would you say it's easier now? Is it becoming easier or more difficult to onboard clients, new clients?
I would say probably easier than it's been, when you first get started. No, to date, I don't think I've had a single client ever ask me like, "Oh, do you have a master's degree?
Hmm.
What did you major in?" or anything like that. I'll talk about it obviously like when you asked, but that isn't really what matters. What matters is the experience. And at
Hmm.
this point, we've worked with hundreds of clients. Like, the odds of us not working in a particular industry, it's actually would be much more odd if we haven't worked in a particular industry. I'm like, we've
Yeah.
worked with cardiovascular polypills, all the way to like
Doesn't
sunglasses.
everybody?
So yeah, right. Duh. Don't you love your cardiovascular polypill?
That's right.
But that's what makes it really interesting. So, like, talking to clients, a lot of times they really just care about what have you done in the past. That's, the best indicator of future behavior is
Sure.
past behavior. And so it's really cool to go over that. But so many times I notice that the similarities isn't by industry. It doesn't matter if we've worked with two seltzer brands necessarily. It matters more like we might have a seltzer brand that's actually much more similar to, a breast pump company that we've worked with for whatever reason.
Hmm.
It's like you start to figure out like, yeah, the target demo or the messaging or the issues they're having really are not industry specific. It might
Yeah.
be either brand specific or their founder specific or regional issues and things like that. So I always tell people like, they'll ask, have you worked with a, energy drink company before or cannabis company? I'm like, yeah. But with some of the stuff you're showing me, actually, like, it's more similar to the XYZ companies
Hmm.
that we've worked with. So that's why I really like that we're pretty industry agnostic.
Yep.
because then we're able to have a much better picture of the whole world and what we're working with.
I mean, I love your answer because if I had to guess what your answer would have been when I asked that question, it would have been, well, it depends because, although we've, worked with a ton of clients, we have a lot better brand and name recognition now. We have more experience. We know what works, but the barrier to entry has been so low that, there's so many people trying to get into this space. So it's a lot more noisy, in the marketing space than it may have been 5 years ago type thing. So I think, you've achieved obviously a good balance. If you can say without hesitation that, hey, I believe it's easier, because the fact that you differentiated yourself somehow.
Yeah. And as a whole, right? Like I remember there was a time in like 2021, all of our leads were pretty much coming from TikTok. Like it was pretty nuts. Huge brands, like household name brands finding us on TikTok and wanting to work with us. I was like, this is really odd. And then it was like TikTok cooled down. And then we really got like a really good push from like Instagram Reels and Instagram. And then it was like, we had a time where it was like, it felt like I was just getting referral after referral. I was like, well, I don't hate that. Or like my personal socials or my LinkedIn. And like, that's my biggest advice to really anybody is like making sure you have an omni-channel strategy and knowing like, we're able to funnel leads so that if LinkedIn got shut down tomorrow or my Instagram got hacked tomorrow, if you live by the sword, you die by the sword. Right. So I like to build momentum in multiple channels. So I think that's why it's been easier to continue to sign more and more clients year over year. Like I obviously I look at it, that's my job. So it's like year over year, we always significantly pass the number that we signed the prior year. And I'm like, well, I think it's because we do a really good job. Not just saying, oh, well, we're great at TikTok. Well, we're just going to hit TikTok 30 times as hard. It's like, well, yes. But I also want to make sure that I'm hitting LinkedIn. I also want to make sure that I'm attending networking events or trying new things like signing up for a website that's supposed to get you leads. Who knows? It's like, experimentation as well as the things that already are working for you.
I mean, and you can see that because, I mean, I think I'm seen stuff that you've done on Instagram, on TikTok, on LinkedIn, but I do think that it's, more than just diversification. Sometimes it's like, going with the hot hand. I mean, it's like, you've got 3 pinch hitters on your bench. Which one is, has gone 2 for 3, this week type thing. So there's an idea that says, what is the hot, the zeitgeist, channel right now that is out there that everybody's kind of gravitating to, or, for whatever reason. Is it X? Is it Instagram? Is it whatever? But and being able to recognize that, kind of reading the tea leaves out there, what is it telling you in the ether about, what people are where your ideal client base is gravitating to. But if you had to look back and like go back to kind of what you had in your mind when you first started this, and then, project out to where you are today, what's been the biggest surprise, or how is it different than what you envisioned when you first started?
I won't lie, it's pretty close to what I envisioned. I would say the team is bigger than I ever envisioned in a great way. I didn't think that we would have either the resources or the clientele or what have you to be able to expand. But it's just been amazing to see people step up into leadership positions, and we've really been able to grow because of that. And that's just, again, such a testament to the whole team. Like they've been so amazing. It's like, even when there's a bump in the road, they're so resilient. And that's the biggest thing is like, if you're working for a startup, you need to be resilient, and your employees need to be resilient as well.
Yep. Well, I think that starts at the top, though. I mean, you do have to lead by example.
Yeah, they always say a fish starts rotting from the head. So sometimes, I'll have entrepreneurs talk to me, and they're all upset about this and that and the other, and I'm like, well, at the end of the day, it is on us. Like, there's been plenty of times where I've been frustrated about something, and you do have to look in the mirror and say, okay, like, let's figure out what I could have done better in this situation. And if there's ever a point where you don't think there's anything that you should have done better, you're probably the problem. You're probably what it is, because that's right. There's always something you could do a little bit better, even if it was like, maybe I just shouldn't have never even hired that person.
Yeah.
Like it might go all the way back to the very beginning, but it's like there's always something you could have done better.
No, it's interesting because you're almost jumping ahead of the questions I
Well,
intended to
Lord.
ask as we moved into this, but this is also a perfect transition for a segue into what I want to ask you next, and that's, as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, as a team, leading a team, to accomplish goals and whatever. What would you say? And you mentioned, you may be client agnostic or industry agnostic, but even like business and agnostic, what are two or three key lessons that you have learned as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, as a leader of a team that you think are kind of would cross industry? These are just really important pillars.
Yeah. I would say approach issues inquisitively
Mhm.
instead of angrily. You have an employee who quote unquote messes something up, or maybe you see an issue with, a manufacturer or whatever. Instead of jumping straight into anger, oh my God, what is this? Why did you send this? Approach things inquisitively. Hey, I saw that I had a client say that your post didn't go out today. I wanted to get clarity on what was happening. And 9 times out of 10, it is something so reasonable.
Hmm.
Oh, I actually, you know, I had scheduled it and they had asked me to take it off and move it, and they must have forgotten. I'll send them the email thread that shows that. Great. You
Yep.
know, that also makes it so that your employees, like when there's an issue, or your team or whoever can approach you in a way and they know that you're on their side. You're not out trying to like bite their head off, which
Hmm.
probably leads me to my next point, which is like not pointing the finger. Like I tell people all the time, it's nobody's fault. Nothing, I don't care about fault literally at all. I don't care if it was the fault of the platform, if it was your fault, their fault, whatever. Let's just make a solution. Obviously we want to know maybe the root cause of an issue to prevent it from happening again. But I don't need to know, oh, well, it was the client's fault because they did this, or if you're working retail, it's the customer's fault because this and this and this. Well, let's step back and say, I had a client issue yesterday actually where they were telling us they were getting a lot of returns through TikTok. They have a device that connects to a sink, filters water. We get so many returns on TikTok. I said, well, on your TikTok listing, I would put on a picture that has all of the sinks, what they look like when they will work, and then pictures of sinks that what it looks like when they don't work. And I was like, you have that on your website, but when you shop through TikTok, you don't go to someone's website. So yes, it's the customer's fault for
Mm.
not doing more research, but what could you be doing to offset that issue? So instead of looking for fault, looking for solutions. And then also, like, my final thing would just be understanding that if you're giving your 100% effort, that's all you can give.
Yeah.
Like I'm a big person, I'll be sitting and I'm stressing and worried about something and all this stuff. And I just get to the point where it's like, it's out of my control. But what I could control in this situation was my effort. Did I communicate through this situation the best that I could? Did I give my biggest effort? Did I do everything in my power to make it right? And I know I can sleep easy knowing that the answer to those questions is yes. I don't know how I would function if the answer was no. And I think
Hmm.
that's where you have to be really self reflective. But if you're giving your 100% effort, nobody can ask any more of you than that. And I'd like to think my 100% has a really high ceiling. So I hold myself to a really high standard. And I always tell my employees, like, or my team members or whoever, like, I would never expect you to do something that, number one, I haven't done or am not willing to do myself.
Hmm.
And number two, like, I'm never going to expect more effort from people who work for me in my company than I'm putting in. And
Yeah.
that's one thing I've had to explain to clients before who might be complaining about people within their own companies is like, oh, this and that. And I'm like, well, do you expect them to be as passionate about your business as you are?
Hmm.
No, like when you love your business and it's your baby, you hold the most equity and you hold the most risk. So
Hmm.
why would they be as passionate about it and accept that there's only a certain threshold anybody else is ever going to hit about your business. And it might be pretty daggum close, but you have to be realistic. Like, if you choose to work on Thanksgiving because you're just like, I love this, I can't stop thinking about it. Okay, that's your choice, but you can't necessarily expect that out of all of the people who work for you. Like, I think everybody who works for PMM is so passionate about what they do and about working for us. But I think that's also because I'm really passionate about it. So it's like, I don't expect to sit on the beach and drink a margarita while everybody else is working their tail off.
Right. Right. I mean, that's a hard sell right there to your team.
Yes.
For sure. But it's interesting because I can picture, as you're talking, I can picture, you know what, she was like this when she was the captain of the volleyball team. So, I mean, there's no doubt these are lessons learned in athletics and in life, you know, that she's just, you know, brought with her into the business space. And they're life lessons, they're life, you know, they're life pillars, you know, that I think are so true. But man, this has been such a great chat. I think I'm really grateful for you taking time today, and you know, it's just been great to hear your story. But is there anything that I have not asked you about that you would just like to close us out with, and then just tell people where the best place to find you online?
Yeah, so kind. I would say really just closing thoughts in general is don't take feedback too personally. Give your best effort in whatever you do, and don't worry about what other people are doing. Just worry about yourself. Even as a manager, obviously, I worry to an extent what other people are doing, but you have to have faith and trust in them.
Yeah.
So I'm worried. You know, I wouldn't say I'm worried, but I don't really worry about what they're doing. I just want to be a resource and make them know I'm there for them. And then in terms of finding me, I'm everywhere. I'm like, search my name. But I'd say the best place to find me is probably Instagram or LinkedIn. My Instagram is just Hailey Brooke 8. 8 was my college number. I always say it's my lucky number. I love it. And then LinkedIn, Hailey Brooke Weiss. So I always joke, my husband, when I met him, I remember the first time we ever spoke, I was like, how do you pronounce your last name? Because I don't know if it's Weiss. I don't know what I'm looking out there. Weiss. I was like, I need to make sure I'm pronouncing this thing if I'm going to take it someday. So just look up Hailey Brooke Weiss on LinkedIn and I'll be there too.
All right. Well, is there any relation to Walt Weiss, who was a shortstop with your husband's connected?
You're not the first person to ask, but not to my knowledge. I don't think anyone else in his family really played competitive sports really at all. Like, they're not really as into the athletic stuff.
I dated myself too, because Walt and I were contemporaries, I'm sure. So it's been a couple of decades ago. But Hailey, thank you so much. Your powermovemarketing.com is also the website that you can learn more about their services. But yeah, there we go. I love that. And it almost has a Christmas motif going there behind you right there.
I know, a little bit with like I normally deck it up a little bit for each holiday. I always say, I'm like, it's trendy, but so is marketing. So
exactly. And cyclical in nature. So, but thank you for just taking time today right here before the holidays. I know it's a busy time as you're trying to wrap up for the year, but really just sharing your expertise and your story, and really just playing your part in helping all boats rise in a rising tide. Hailey, thanks again.
Thank you.
I hope you heard some great takeaways from our guests today. Make sure you reach out to them, and thank you again for playing your part in helping all boats rise in a rising tide.